so I finally had a chance to play Cyberpunk 2077 in VR, and it was a mind-melting experience. I mean, jaw on the floor, I thought I was just stepping in for a few minutes to check it out, and before I knew it, 6 hours had passed. No exaggeration, I think this might be the most incredible looking thing that I have ever played in VR. And the craziest part about this to me is that it's being made possible by the fan-made Luke Ross mod. We'll talk about that more at the end of the video, so stick around if you want to hear more about it. If you clicked on this video looking to find out if Cyberpunk 2077 is worth trying in VR, I'll save you some time. If you have a decent PC VR setup, you should absolutely go check this out. What I want to talk about today is how this fan-made experience has completely changed my perspective on the current state of VR and why I think we need more of this.
Down for some target practice in VR?
I don't know that I can appropriately express just how much I like Cyberpunk 2077. Even day one, I was playing on PC and didn't encounter a lot of the same issues that others were clearly having, leading to the now notorious launch of Cyberpunk. And even the issues and shortcomings that I did encounter, I was willing to look past because this game speaks to me on a very deep level. The gritty sci-fi worlds of things like Blade Runner or William Gibson's Neuromancer are hugely influential in my life. And with the promise of a highly detailed world like that to explore, I was sold. The world that CD Projekt Red created in Cyberpunk was everything I hoped it would be. This has been one of my favorite games in the last decade, and I've spent entirely too much money upgrading my PC to see it in its full ray-traced glory. So of course, when videos started to surface of Cyberpunk 2077 in VR, I was interested, but what kept me from jumping in was the same thing that's kept me from jumping into other VR mods. You see, mods like this often lack a lot of the features and interactivity that you would expect from a full dedicated VR experience, like motion controls and the ability to mess with the world. These kind of features were honestly a big draw for me even getting involved in VR in the first place, so I wasn't necessarily interested in experiences without them. It kind of felt like a step backwards. This mod definitely has limitations, but I'm here to tell you that I am converted, and the fact that this holds up as well as it does is credit to the developers. Even under the scrutiny of VR, where it feels like you're standing inches away from characters, or walking through the streets looking up at buildings, I felt incredibly immersed despite the limitations of a mod like this. Even when the game takes control from you and you're just watching a first-person cinematic, the fact that I was using an Xbox controller just kind of faded into the background. I would even say that in the case of Cyberpunk, there are moments where the lack of motion controls is actually a benefit. The first time I got into a car shootout, I kept thinking how awkward that would have felt with motion controls, but how immersive and tense it was in this case. I have my own hangups on full bodies being represented in VR, and I talked about it at length in my Boneworks video. But because the developers originally did so much incredible animation work for that first-person body, your brain just kind of accepts it because everything feels right and you don't run into any of those weird collision problems. Obviously, I would love if Cyberpunk had motion controls and all the interactivity we've come to expect from big VR titles. But as I mentioned at the top of the video, this is a fan-made mod. The fact that this is even possible is incredible, and it being this good is even more impressive. So why aren't more people doing this? Anybody that's been playing VR over the last couple years has probably noticed the distinct lack of big AAA titles. The only reason I even decided to check out the Cyberpunk mod is because I was looking for something more substantial than what most of the VR titles offer, especially for the PC VR crowd, and what I ended up finding was breathtaking. Look, I'm not a game developer. I know that a couple people in my comments said that they are, and maybe they can chime in here. Not to point out the obvious, but game development is incredibly difficult. I don't know how much time it would take for a developer to natively implement something like what Luke Ross has done here. But I think if more developers took that chance, it would open up endless possibilities for VR. Even the bare bones implementation here in Cyberpunk made me appreciate this game on a whole new level. The artistry on display is just unbelievable. The density and detail of this world becomes so apparent when you can walk around in it. The dynamics of interacting with other characters completely changes when you're literally sitting across the table from them. Playing this game felt like a glimpse into the future of VR, the kinds of experiences that we've all dreamt about. It's not all perfect. There's definitely some visual bugs. Sometimes things can appear pretty muddy. Occasionally, your head doesn't quite line up properly with your body. And if you're someone that's sensitive to motion sickness, there's times in this mod that might get you. But even still, this is one of the most incredible experiences that I've had in VR. Cyberpunk definitely benefits from its $436 million budget, which, if I had to guess, is about $400 million more than the biggest VR titles. And that's why I hope we see more of this. ideally native implementations from the developers themselves. It will probably be decades before any developers can justify this kind of investment into VR titles, and being able to experience games like this in VR is probably the closest we're gonna get. But if Cyberpunk is any indication, I'm okay with that for now. Everything I've been showing has been made possible by the Luke Ross VR mod. If you're interested in checking this out, I highly recommend you go check out his Patreon. I'll include a link to it in my description. He's still dropping updates on the further development of the Cyberpunk mod, but he also supports a handful of other games, and I can't wait to check some of those ones out too. It's pretty simple to get it working in Cyberpunk and really only requires you dropping a few files into your Cyberpunk folder and then running his configuration program. You will have to tinker around with the settings in Cyberpunk and the mod to find the sweet spot for your specific setup, but once you do that, you're in for a hell of a treat. Most of the instructions I think on his Patreon are specific to the Steam version of the game, but I've been running the GOG version with the same instructions and haven't run into any big issues. I'm really excited that I finally decided to give this a chance, and you can expect a lot more of this type of video in the future. I've already got Alien Isolation, No One Lives Forever 2, and Half-Life 2 lined up, so subscribe if you want to see those. And I'm probably going to check out some UE2 VR stuff in the future too, so leave your recommendations down in the comments. As always, if you made it this far and you enjoyed the video, I really do appreciate any time somebody hits that like button. It really helps my content get out there. And if you didn't like the video, hit that dislike button and let me know why. Thanks again, and I'll catch you in the next one.